Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in the space. This week is episode 3 of season 3. We're going to have a chat around reducing your costs in Azure. Everyone likes to save money, so we're going to take you through 15 tips on how to optimize your costs in Azure. Just please don't tell Microsoft that we told you how to do this. Hey Alan, how are you doing?
Hey Sam, I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, it's been a busy start to the new year. It's I think we're back onto our upload schedule, which is really positive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's good to be back. I think I said this last episode that it's really good to get back into recording again.
Yeah, definitely. It gives us some structure to our week, right, and keeps us on our toes. So yeah, it's great. Right, let's jump straight into this topic then, because we've got quite a lot to get through. So yeah, as I mentioned in the intro, we're gonna go through some hopefully some valuable cost saving tips for you in Azure. We've tried to pick out as many and varied different cost saving tips. People listening to this podcast might have a variety of different, resources and infrastructure that are running in Azure. So there's not sort of one size fits all. So you might find that some of these aren't applicable to your workloads, but we're hopeful that you'll get some sort of value from it. Right, so let's kick off. So what we're going to do is we're going to tag team through this. So we're going to take each. We're going to go alternative, me and Alan, and we're just going to discuss each one, and hopefully we'll move on to the next. Got a few to do, so we are going to rattle through them as quickly as possible to give you as much value as quickly as we can. Cool. So I think my first money saving tip is to actually use the cost management portal. It might seem really simple, it's not any sort of hidden tip or anything, but that really is the first port of call to understand, the costs that are in your environment. You may have spun up a new set of resources or infrastructure in your environment, and you leave it for a day or two, and it can start to forecast and predict your costs over that month. You can also go back and look at previous months' spending over different periods and really drill it down. And you can also break down by types of resources, the resource groups that they're in, and their locations, which is really powerful as well. And I think what we're really here doing is we're just trying to report and understand on what we are spending money on before we maybe dive into anything more specific. Any other sections of cost management, Alan, that you think are worth highlighting?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, it's quite handy to see what you're spending and breaking it down.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, Alan, what got any tips for us?
So following on from that, I would probably say around the VM sizing. So there are various different VM sizing, CPUs, uh, RAM, etc. But quite a lot of the time, they're very underutilized. You may have services or processes that are running on these virtual machines, but actually, they're not constantly doing that. They may be a bit sort of burst, batching, or they may just not be. They might be recommended spec from a supplier, maybe, but actually, in a cloud environment, it might be that actually you need to sort of lower that skew down because you pay for for in effect you want them to be running as hot as possible in some sense. Um, so yeah, there's definitely skews in that, and it's just working out what you can do. There are also some burstable instances where if you are doing batching, you can. If they're idling for most of the time, maybe they batch over in the night. They're quite useful. Sam, anything on that?
I think for me, it's benchmarking um, the VM sizes to your workload. I think is really important as well, because we've also seen AMD versus Intel, um, you know, of series equivalent machines performing very differently for different workloads. Um, and there's so many different SKUs of sizes with seemingly unlimited different combinations of virtual cores to RAM ratios and things like that. um, and also network, connectivity as well. You might have some sort of niche, high throughput requirement there as well. So yeah, really understand those SKUs and really go to benchmark and don't approach this like you would in a traditional data center. You can scale SKUs. On a frequency, on a timer, should you wish as well. It really depends on your workload, and also have good utilization of those virtual machines, because if you're not using that RAM you're paying for, you're wasting money. It's as simple as that. There is a fine line to tread there, though, definitely.
Yeah, there's probably one more thing around that, and that's trying to making sure you're keeping up to date with the new SKUs that come in, because they
Yes.
do reduce their price. Well, they don't reduce their price; they can take more load on those new SKUs over the other ones. So
Yeah, it's better price to performance for sure, right? For every pound dollar spent, you're getting more performance, definitely. Okay,
yeah,
so my next tip is around it's kind of on the same sort of lines, but virtual machine scheduling. So if you are running IaaS virtual machines in Azure, there may be certain workloads where you can, literally turn off those machines and deallocate them. Then you're going to completely save any of um, your your CPU and memory costs. You're only going to be paying for storage of your disks at that point. Not all workloads are going to be able to do that, but if you do have services that don't need to run during the evening, maybe it's worth shutting them down. And I think the other part for me is don't be frightened to use, say, logic apps or any custom scripting to either turn on or off or even scale those virtual machines dependent on your use cases. um, Alan, do you want to talk about what we've been doing at AVD with VM scheduling?
yeah. Well, I was going to say I was about to say that's probably a good workload where you can do that. So we've got we've done a logic app that checks every 15 minutes to see if there's any users on the machines, if they're powered on, and if there isn't any, then we shut it down. We don't need to turn it on because the Azure Virtual Desktop AVD is able to start on Connect, so that deals with that part. But yeah, Logic Apps, there's some nice and easy connectors for turning on and shutting down VMs, and then using the APIs and things like that, you can do a bit more complex things in there.
Yeah, and you will make an investment in terms of building, those types of systems, for sure. But what you'll usually find is you'll get pretty rapid payback, especially if you are using, say, high virtual machine sizes. So, for instance, with AVD, we use relatively decent virtual machines, so we can get multiple lots of as many users as reasonably possible onto one box to save cost. So every hour that they're operational is costing relatively quite a lot of money if you left it on for the whole month. So we really do compress our costs right down to actual the consumption of AVD that our users have.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so my next section is reservations. So this can be run. The reservations are in effect paying for 24/7 machines being on, and you can get a discount. I think it's like 10-15%, isn't it, Sam? Something like that. And in effect, you can buy a reservation for a virtual machine SKU, and then in effect it reduces the cost. So you're just in effect paying up front, and you get a discount. You can also do that on I think it's SQL. Is that right, Sam? There's a few other workloads that can have reservations as well.
Yeah, so the savings can be quite lucrative. On Windows virtual machines, it could be anywhere up to 80% savings
Wow.
versus pay as you go, which is really powerful. Linux, quite a little bit less, 72%. You can do Azure SQL databases. You can do Cosmos DB. So they're not we're talking about reserved instances in terms of virtual machine, but on the PaaS side of things, they're talking about reserved capacities. So you've got Azure SQL Database, Cosmos DB, Synapse Analytics, Azure Storage Reserve Capacity now as well, and App Service. So it the only thing I would say about those PaaS offerings, it's usually the higher tiers that would be more eligible for things like reserve capacity. So if you're in Azure SQL Database and you're using, say, DTUs, which is a more cost-effective way than buying like straight up vCores, you're probably not going to get reserve capacity, but it'll be when you're using those vCore based machines that you'll be able to apply those savings, because they're effectively virtual machines that are running at that point. But yeah, if you are looking to run workloads for a long time in Azure, and in a production enterprise capacity, we're not really thinking of in the pay as you go mindset. We're rolling out resources and infrastructure that are potentially going to be there for years. And now with the cloud, it's not like there's an upgrade cycle either, so they could stay there, you know, indefinitely, really. So purchasing an element of reserve capacity can be very beneficial, especially in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. The only other sort of reservations there might be is around log analytics and Sentinel, in that you can do reserved log, or in effect, pay monthly for the log ingestion, get discount. So for Sentinel, if you ingest 100 GB per day, and you hit that reservation, then it's 55% discount. So in effect, you have to ingest 51 gig, and then you're making a saving from then on.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of lucrative, especially when you are utilizing a lot of resource, right? So it
Yeah.
is, these things are usually tailored to people that are spending decent amounts of money over long periods of time, and Microsoft is recognizing that and applying a discount because you're taking it for such a long time. Okay, my next tip is spot instances. So if you like to live life on the edge, you can decide to bid for extra capacity within Microsoft's data centers. So if you imagine, let's say you've got an A1 SKU. Let's say Microsoft's total capacity is 1,000, virtual machines. If there's only 500 running, then the other 500 can be. It's not that simplistic, but I'm just using that as a way to explain it. Microsoft sell off those other 500 spot instances via a spot instance auction. So what you do is you bid a spot price that you're willing to pay, and there is a current spot price which updates, in real time. So let's say your instance was £1 an hour, would be a very expensive, very expensive instance. But let's say it's £1 an hour. The spot price for that instance could be 20 pence per hour. And they do vary, and they do go up and down. And spot prices can sometimes inflate to higher than pay as you go pricing. So you sometimes do need to be careful, and spot instances can run out of capacity like completely. So spot instances are great for things like batch jobs that can um, maybe have some flexibility in how they run and the life cycle in which they run and the availability that you maybe need. You can also use spot instances to expand your pool of available resources. Let's say you have a virtual machine, a bunch of virtual machines, and you keep some of them on pay as you go or reserved instances, so you have some dedicated capacity, and then maybe you supplement that with spot instances alongside. Spot instances, could theoretically be deallocated or terminated at any time. So production web servers, firewalls, things like that, probably not a great idea for them. But if you do need flexible capacity, and you can take on that I'll use air quotes, risk of them being removed, then they can be very, very advantageous in terms of cost.
Yeah, we were debating whether to try it with AVD, didn't we? With maybe having one that was normal and then maybe a couple that weren't, but we went against it.
No, yeah, not in, not for. Well, the thing is, I think we found that VM scheduling, sort of cost saving was way enough already, right?
Yeah.
So we just try and optimize our machines being off as much as as much as we possibly can.
Yes. Okay. So the next bit is around the actual subscriptions themselves. So if you do a lot of development, or you have your staging areas as well, um, you can actually change when you build the subscription. You can actually choose a different SKU for the pricing. So you can choose to have dev test pricing, and in effect, it's there's quite a big discount, isn't there, Sam, on some instances and things like that. It's mostly around Windows. So in effect, it kind of feels like they're giving you the Windows licensing pricing um, included sort of thing. So you in effect get a discount for that. Um, but one thing to make note is that you you can't run production services on it because there is no or limited support on it from Microsoft. It is designed to be build, test. If it breaks, it's if it's fixed when it's fixed kind of thing. So there's um, no compensation or anything like that around it.
Yeah, no, I don't believe there's an SLA at all.
No.
Definitely not a production SLA, that's for sure, on dev test. And yeah, like you say, I think the biggest benefit is the wiping of the Windows license cost. It
Yeah.
effectively nullifies the difference between Linux and Windows instances. So you do still pay, you know, uh, you do still pay like a decent price for your instances, but you are making a massive, you can make a big saving there as well, especially if you combine it with some of the other, especially in a dev test scenario. So, for instance, you might not need your staging site up at the weekend because nobody's testing staging overnight and things like that. So dev test areas are great for VM scheduling and different strategies like that. Okay, I'm going to intro the next one, but I really struggle to, and I still haven't used it in production savings plan. So it kind of, yeah, boggles my mind a little bit on the best way to explain it. So we've talked about reservations, which is paying up front for a, and please keep me honest here, Alan. I'm gonna feed back to you on savings plan because it is new to me. Um, so a savings plan allows you to pay an hourly rate that you set across all of your instances. Is that right, Alan? And then you only pay above that if your utilization goes higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you specify your utilization of that VM, and then you that's the cost you pay. And like you said, if you go above it, then you pay the pay as you go price. So
Okay.
yeah, you get like a say you've got something that maybe you don't need the full CPU, but you need all the RAM, maybe, and you can say sort of, well, I'm only going to use 50-60% of the CPU. I just want to pay for 60%, and they'll give you a discount on saying that you'll use that much. And then when you sort of in effect burst above it, you then just pay as you go for the time that it's bursting above it.
Okay, so you can kind of have the benefits of burstable instances, but without all of the credit sort of, you know, and an
Yeah.
SLA is, and a proper production ready instance as well. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can just, because there's now multiple different ways to get sort of instance discounts that you can even combine together as well to, compound your savings even further. Because I believe you can use hybrid benefits as well with savings plans. So it's all, it's there's a lot of different factors there
Okay.
to
Yeah.
yeah. I haven't used savings plans like in anger whatsoever yet, but I'd be very interested to, when we move on to cost optimization of our migration project. It'd be really interesting to see if we can utilize savings plans, because it does seem like a really powerful way to set things up. But I do kind of feel like you're going to have to maybe think about those things a little bit more than just paying up front for an instance for 1 to 3 years, right? You're defining your parameters for that saving.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the next section is scale sets. So this is a load of virtual machines. In effect, you can get them to, if you've got a workload like I guess it'd be like a web service or a batch job process, and all the machines are identical. You can, in effect, provide the image to that scale set and or build process, and it can, in effect, when load on that pool of machines hits a criteria that you set, it will then um, extend or build new machines in effect to help you with that load. And then once load is gone, so maybe you've got a release of, let's say, an NFT going out, and everyone's trying to mine it to what do you call it? It's not mine it,
Mint
is
your
it?
NFT.
Mint it.
Yeah.
That's it. Um, yeah, maybe they're trying to do that, so you need it to like expand quickly to deal with the load sort of thing. Or it might be scored missions being one. It only happens twice. See everyone seeing all their results or trying to put in their admissions for their school they want to choose for their kids. So it's able to expand and contract as and when you need it to, which is very powerful because you don't have to predict having the full load 20 all the time.
Yeah, because in a more traditional sort of, say, data center deployment, you'd need to provision your maximum capacity for the lifetime of that machine, right? Because you can't
Yeah.
dynamically. You can, I suppose, because you can, have clusters of machines, and you can do this. You know, you can do this in those environments. Um, but this is just a like a I want I would like one machine for the normally, and then I want to be able to expand up to 10 and then go back to one, should I want to. The only thing I'd say about that is your application that's running on top of that has to be flexible in the way that it operates as well. But definitely a really powerful way of doing it. I think you can have spot instances in a scale set as well, can't you? I
Wow.
believe.
Okay. Well, that'd be
I
cool.
think
That'd be actually quite good, actually,
I
wouldn't it?
think you can. Yeah, I'll check that out just to make sure. When you're talking about your next tip, and
But
just make sure,
but
keep me honest. So yeah.
but yeah. So but also what's included with this is there's always a load balancer in front that automatically adds the new and the new VMs into that load balance for your website or your service. So you don't have to worry about any manual process there. There's just one place you go to, and then it provides you with the resource behind.
Yeah, so just to confirm, you can use spot instances in a scale set. You just can't use B series, which would be a bit mental as well, right? Because you'd
Spot
get like
burstables.
swap burstables. Yeah, that would be like it would just be, yeah, for all your DDoS requirements for sure. Yeah, so and there's some other like promo versions of different sizes as well that you can use. But yeah, just quick look up at the Microsoft Docs. You definitely can. I think I've tested that before, and you just really quickly hit Microsoft, SKU limits, like on your
The quotas.
subscriptions, quotas. That's it, yeah. And they're like, no, you can't have that many. You're like, but I want all these instances, because what's really funny about spot instances, you can get some really insane machines, like really high core counts, like multiple GPUs, like they're like £7 an hour, like £15 an hour or something like that. Stick them in a spot instance, and then you're like, "Oh, can I have one?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can have one." Can I have five? No way. Like you can't do that. So, but yeah, really powerful skill sets. My next one's going to be a bit of a curveball. I'm quite a what's the word? Not a huge lover of IaaS. To be totally honest with you, I'm a PaaS sort of guy, from sure. So I'm going to give you a bit of a curveball, and I'm going to I'm going to recommend that you, if possible, move your IaaS workloads to PaaS or SaaS workloads, if possible. And the reason why I say this is because usually the intro SKUs or sizes on PaaS are usually cheaper than and still have good SLAs, right? So the cheapest production standard ready app service is a lot cheaper than well, it can be cheaper than an instance running with all of the software on it to do the same thing. But that's not really the biggest benefit that I see. I think it's the ops costs of running those IaaS. Like, they're not really hidden costs, but they kind of are. It's your time, your energy, to keep those those instances patched, running, and configured, hardened, and making sure that they're doing the right thing. Instead of installing SQL Server on a box, maybe think about Azure SQL. Slap Defender for Defender for Cloud, Defender for Azure SQL, or Defender for SQL on top of it, and you've got a really well observed SQL instance, and you don't have to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure. So time is money. So it might be cheaper for you to maybe pay a little bit extra to Microsoft to handle all of that, but sit back and relax once it's done.
It's definitely around the patching and things like that, isn't it? Trying to keep things patched and patching quickly from vulnerabilities, things like that. That's going to be
Yeah,
done by Microsoft
yeah,
or
yeah.
or other cloud providers, of course. But yeah,
Disaster recovery, business continuity. You could sometimes have a criticism of PaaS that you might not be able to get an export out and have like a true raw backup file that maybe might work like on another provider. Like backing up app service and things like that. But in terms of uh, uh, getting back to a good known state, in the middle of the night, unless you want to keep your phone on loud all the time and be on call, you know, um, they could have an issue in the data center, and it be resolved before you even know, that it's even happened, right? So, yeah, kick back, relax, make it somebody else's problem.
it's just easy for when you want to build one, bring one up and bring it down, isn't it? It's just there, or within minutes at least, it's there. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so kind of coming back to logs and Azure Monitor and Sentinel. Um, one key tip is to try and optimize what you're ingesting. Do you need all these logs? What are they used for? Especially within Microsoft Sentinel, are you bringing in everything from all of your servers? Have you got using the Microsoft Monitoring Agent instead of the Azure Monitoring Agent now, the new one? Because with the AMA now, you can really optimize what you bring in per server, where beforehand with the MMA, it was in effect a catch-all for everything. So you increase how many logs you get. It means you get for every server, and incurs costs. So driving that down, optimizing it to make sure from a Sentinel perspective, making sure that you've got the right logs, definitely, and not the other bits. There are other you've got basic logs now as well as analytic logs, so it depends on the type of data you're bringing in and the cost.
Yeah, and for me, application insights as well is important. If you've got some sort of custom application that's maybe firing logs into application insights, just watch out for that. Especially if your log levels aren't configured correctly, you could be sending a lot of logs into these. They're technically SaaS solutions, right? Aren't they? Like log
Yeah.
analytics and stuff like that. It's not PaaS, is it? It's SaaS. I would say. I don't know. Is it PaaS? It's not. Yeah, no, it's a
It's
SaaS service, isn't
PaaS.
it?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know what it is, right? But so those types of systems, there is going to be an ingest cost, a storage cost, a retent, and all of those different things. So just make sure that you've got those things tuned, and that you're happy with those costs that are going in. My next one is going to be around hybrid benefits. So it allows you to use your software assurance enabled Windows Server, SQL Server, and Red Hat subscriptions on Azure virtual machines. So so what you're going to get is you're going to get a is it a full removal, Alan, if you've got, say, a Windows Server license, or is it just reduced for hybrid benefits?
I believe it's a removal of that license cost,
Yeah.
but you do have to have software assurance on those licenses, which is
Yes.
additional cost.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. So that is a way to reduce a lot of costs, and people in larger organisations might not realise that that is available to them to utilise.
yeah, you normally get your software assurance licensing if you've got an enterprise agreement.
Okay.
You may be able to get some other ways, but that's the main one that I've seen it in. But yeah, the next one's kind of a little bit simple. Are you using everything? You know, if you got stuff there that's been sat there for 5 years and now you've upgraded and it's just sat there turned on, do you need to turn it off? I think yeah, that's the key thing. We've seen it, Sam, haven't we, in a couple of organisations where there's just been stuff just sat there in subscriptions and they don't know what it is or don't know who the owner is, and it's I guess sometimes it's difficult that it hasn't been documented that what it is and where or what its use is, I guess.
Yeah, we've seen it where uh, technical employees have made, say, maybe like test systems to validate an issue, or sorry, to replicate an issue, or they built out a test version of their environment. They usually name it with their name and then dash test on the end of it, and then it's really simple scenario. They then end up leaving the organization, forget to clean up before they go, and then before you know it, it's just sat there, burning uh, cost. I mean, those types of systems usually won't get noticed in larger organizations that have big Azure spend, right? Because if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, euros, pounds, per month on your Azure, um, you know, um, 5 or 6 VMs just running, you might not notice it, but over time, that is going to be a big cost that you're going to incur. So it sounds simple, and it's not really like an Azure hack, but we do see a lot of waste, in customer tenants. It's just a fact of what we end up seeing. So I think it is worth calling out. There's some good documentation tools out there to build like topologies of your environments. So maybe use that. Maybe use the cost management blades to really understand what is running, and make sure it's actually something that you want. And forget about the cost. It could also be security security issue. So definitely keep on top of any unneeded resources.
Yeah, it's a very good point, actually, isn't it? That it might be sat there not being used, but actually it's never been patched for the last couple of years, and it's a way to get
Uh,
in.
yeah, and I'll give you some examples of not like VMs and things like that. If you say got a SQL Azure Elastic instance, your application can programmatically recreate databases at different like SKU levels and things like that. And not even a SQL instance, just a normal SQL server. So you could say provision a database, and then just like never use it, like an extra test database, and it might just be costing you, you know, 20, 30, 40 pounds a month, that you just don't know because it's in a big long list of databases, and you've really got to look through and understand what you're using. So it's really easy to do because the portal doesn't stop you from creating things, does it? There's no like, are you really sure you want to create this? This is gonna, I suppose it does tell you what it's gonna like deploy and things like that. But who doesn't just press like next, 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 right? So yeah.
Yeah, I guess a way to sort of reduce that is around the RBAC, the permissions within Azure, I guess, that only certain people can build stuff. It won't necessarily stop it, but it might reduce
Yeah, yeah.
the
Permission.
how quick it gets done.
Permission structure, Defender for Cloud, Terraform, documentation services, and the cost center. I think there's multiple ways that you can have good visibility and control over
Yeah.
what is deployed into your environments. Definitely. Okay. Another. We're getting towards the end, so these are getting trickier and trickier for us. But one thing I just wanted to call out was potentially containerizing your applications and switching over to containers. And I'll tell you the reason why, because if you've got a workload where you've got lots of different smaller services, maybe you're a microservices type organization. If you are a microservices type organization, then you've probably already gone through this process, but that might be part of your strategy coming up. But what containers allow you to do is to go sub vCore level um, um, slicing of your resources. So you could say right, this container is only using a quarter of a vCore, and 100 megabytes of RAM. So if you do have, say, like, you do provision 2 virtual cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM, you can chop those up in a lot more flexible way, because you don't have that operating system overhead. You're just paying for what that container is using, and so there's a lot of good container orchestration products in Azure. So it might be worth looking at that, because it can give you more flexibility. Now you're going to have a there's going to have to be an investment of time to do that. So you might want to do a cost benefit, analysis there. It might say, well, it's going to take us 3 weeks or 2 months to containerize our applications. Actually, it's better off just us paying 30-40% more for our resources. And that is also absolutely fine. But just something to think about, especially if you're building custom software deployments.
Yep. Okay. So the next one for me is cost alerts. So I've not used these yet, but in effect, you can create alerts for your spend on subscriptions and maybe resource groups, um, to be able to then see a spike in spend. So you can see when someone's spun up that um, £11 an hour VM when they shouldn't
Yeah.
be, sort of thing.
Nothing better than a cost alert. I'm not actually. I used to do a lot of work with startups, and they were very cost conscious. They would like to run on absolutely minimal infrastructure, just in terms of cost, not in terms of like how it's set up or anything like that. But if somebody accidentally created a database that was like £100 a day, a cost alert is a really good way to be alerted of that pretty quickly, and to stop that spend happening. So, for instance, like what I like to do is I like to set a middle of the month target, a benchmark. Let's say you thought you would spend £300 in a month. Send yourself an email get yourself an alert, mid month if you've gone over £150, if it was a £300 target, things like that. And then, okay, yeah, you might have burnt potentially 15 days on that, but it's going to be no more than that, because you're going to get that email and you're going to go, what's going on here, and you're just going to get rid of it um, straight away. um, okay, and the next one for me, and our 15th one. So we've got through these pretty well, actually. Well, we are on 40 minutes, but we've at least not spent like 10 minutes per one on. To me, it's utilizing in-memory caching. So a bit of a niche, potentially a niche one, especially if you're not doing any sort of custom development. But you know, we usually see a lot of underutilization of RAM and memory in virtual machines. So sometimes it can be advantageous to put an in-memory cache on that server with maybe a maximum caching capacity on it, to cache some of the data that may go back to your data layer. That means that your users are going to have a better experience if you can manage that cache lifecycle, and you're also going to put less pressure on maybe say your relational data stores or any third-party systems. You're going to remove all the latency, and let that memory really soak up any of the spiky like requests, especially for web requests and things like that. If you do custom development, you don't even have to use a separate system. Say if you're a .NET developer, you can use an in-memory cache to cache parts of your application. So that's not necessarily like an Azure specific, a platform specific one. But if you are running workloads there that can utilize caching, maybe you've got like some sort of data visualization system that you're not, can be connected to a Redis cache. A lot of them can. Make sure you are using that caching, because RAM is um, cheap as a resource, and it's plentiful as well in its capacity. And I'm just going to do one final bonus one, because everybody loves, some extra, extra cost saving tips. And the last one that I've got is around Elastic SQL Azure Elastic databases. I kind of find Elastic databases from um, my experience aren't like utilized quite a lot, but they are incredibly powerful billing mechanisms, and that's all Elastic databases are. um, is really like a billing layer on top of a normal Azure SQL instance. What you can effectively do, and I'll use DTUs. um, DTUs is the example. Let's say you want to provision 50 DTUs, and let's say you have 10. Say you have 10 databases. So what you could do is you could create 10 databases with 10 DTUs each. I mean, that wouldn't be a standard production ready instance. I think the minimum is 50 DTUs you have to give to a standard level database. But a standard level Elastic database, I think, is the minimum is 100. I think, right? You basically pay for 100 DTUs of capacity, and then what you can do is you can add, like, let's say, I think the maximum at that level is maybe 100 or 200 databases, and they can all share that maximum capacity, because a lot of databases will just sit there idle for most of their time, and then it might be that they get a flood of traffic, or some batch processing happens and a lot of load goes onto them. So you could then let them soak up some of that DTU, and spike up, and you can set the levels. You could say, like, this database can only use a maximum of 1 DTU, this database can use a maximum of 20 DTUs. And DTUs are a blend of, I believe they're a blend of CPU, memory, and disk IO, but just in a really easily manageable like number. Basically, the more DTUs the better. Basically. And there is a way to work out, like, if you're on prem, what that translates into DTUs. So you can go in and learn about those. But Elastic databases can be really 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 powerful, especially if you're building SaaS applications. Maybe have a multi-tenant SaaS application. It's a really really cost efficient way to get multi-tenancy inside of your organization. And if you've just got a lot of databases, and especially if they're not particularly used, but Elastic databases can go up to like thousands of DTUs, I believe. So it's a really scalable product.
Wow.
And that's it. That's all of our cost saving tips. So I thought there was some good. Personally, I thought there's some good ones in there, and just areas that we generally tend to look at. So I hope everybody found at least a few nuggets of knowledge, and maybe things that they hadn't had exposure to. Alan, is there anything you're now going to go and check? Are you worried about any of your, you know, dev tenants or anything like that? Your dev
Uh,
subscriptions?
No, I think they're okay. I think I've already been burnt once with it by leaving. Um, because like I think when I was testing AVD, I left didn't have a scheduled shutdown on it,
Right. Yep.
so it left
Classic.
running
Yeah.
and used my credit up. So yeah, I've been burnt.
Yeah.
Not bad,
Yeah.
not bad, but
No,
yeah.
I had it the other day. I built a VM in Azure to only just test with for the night. So I just like, select it. I didn't like cost optimize it. I just picked something, and it wasn't until I think it was like it was something like the 2 or 3 days before my next billing period, just all my stuff cut off, and I was like, that's a bit weird, like what's going on? And I just nuked all my credit, and I was like, damn it, I only wanted to like boot that up. It's quite lucky that I didn't actually pick a powerful
Yeah,
you know more powerful instance. So yeah, we've definitely I haven't really had any problems in production before because I'm quite I'm
reserved.
just well, I am, yeah, I am reserved, but I also um I just never want to have that conversation with a customer, that's for sure. So I've never been burnt in production, um but in um dev test, that's where the mistakes do happen.
I mean, another quick, bonus
Oh,
one.
another
Yeah, I know.
bonus.
Another bonus, not on the not on the list. Um, it's potentially using Azure policy to stop you from actually uh,
Yeah.
using big VMs. If you
Yes.
only want to provide stop people from having those big VMs, you can do Azure policy to specify what SKUs you use. So
Yep.
that helps. It doesn't reduce cost, but it stops you from burning cost when you don't
Yep.
need to, or accidental
Oh,
cost.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. You're all not having GPU instances, so yeah, yeah, get on with your burstable instances, everybody. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, no, great one, Alan. That's awesome. Next episode, Alan, what are we talking about next?
So still on Azure and Azure AD, but we're going to talk about privileged identity management, so PIM, and more around securing Azure AD and Azure itself. Access to the environment, only having just in time access.
Nice. Yeah, PIM is really powerful, isn't it? I
Yes.
I'm a big fan of PIM, so yeah, that's going to be, well, for me that's going to be a great episode because I do love talking about it. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many more topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
We also have the ability for you to give us some feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Is there a specific tip that you liked? Do you disagree with any of them? Did we miss anything? I'm sure we
Yeah,
probably did.
definitely. I bet you loads of people have really good, cost saving tips.
um, yeah, so in the notes, or the show notes, just there's a link in there. So just send us a message.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Alan, and we'll catch you all next week. Cheers.
Yeah, catch you later. Cheers. Bye.